Welcome to this explainer. Let's get right into it, because today we're diving into the high-stakes reality of maritime operations. Now, I know it's incredibly easy to get totally lost in the engineering, the thermodynamic physics, and just the daily grind of running a massive gas carrier. But underneath all of that machinery and all of those deeply complex systems lies the absolute foundation of a vessel's commercial and legal protection. We're talking about routine ship operations that, if mishandled, can literally unravel millions of dollars in legal shields in the blink of an eye. So, in this explainer, we're going to connect the dots between your everyday operational checkboxes and the massive legal obligations they actually represent.
Think about every single charter party ever negotiated, and every cargo claim that ever makes it to a messy dispute. On the surface, they might look completely different, right? But eventually, they all come back to one single, foundational legal question. Was this ship actually seaworthy when it left port? If you get that answer wrong, an owner can instantly lose almost every single legal protection they thought they had under their contracts. It's basically the ultimate maritime trump card.
Section 1. The Foundation, Seaworthiness, and Due Diligence.
Okay, we need to break down the first pillar of your operational protection. We hear the word seaworthiness thrown around all the time, but what is the actual actionable definition? What's the legal standard behind it? Well, it's definitely not just about whether the ship floats. Seaworthiness isn't one single pass or fail test. It actually requires independent passes across 4 distinct categories. First, you need a physically sound hull. Second, you need functional, reliable machinery. Third, you need adequate STCW certified and competent crewing. And then there's the fourth piece, which is absolutely crucial, cargo worthiness. This means the vessel is specifically fit to carry the particular cargo safely. For a gas carrier, your containment and handling systems must actually be fit for the exact specific gas being loaded. If you're loading an IGC threshold gas, a standard chemical tanker hull just isn't going to cut it. All 4 of these boxes absolutely must be checked.
But here is where the law actually gives you a bit of breathing room. Under the Hague and Hague-Visby rules, which are what govern these bills of lading and cargo liabilities, the carrier's burden is to exercise what is called due diligence. The law makes a really important distinction between an absolute guarantee and due diligence. It doesn't demand a strict liability 100% absolute guarantee that nothing will ever break or go wrong. Actually, scratch that. It's more like a provable duty of care. It requires you to prove that you took genuine, reasonable, and highly documented steps to make the ship seaworthy before and at the start of the voyage.
Section 2. The Evidence. Cargo Sampling Procedure.
So if due diligence is your shield, physical evidence is exactly how you prove you are actually holding that shield. This sampling procedure is exactly how you protect against millions of dollars in liability when cargo inevitably arrives damaged or out of spec. Cargo sampling exists to protect everyone involved, and it happens in 3 chronological phases. First up, representative samples are drawn pre-loading. This confirms the cargo actually matches the specification before a single drop enters your tanks. Second, samples are drawn during loading. This is basically your insurance policy to catch any contamination that might be sneaking in from the shorelines as the product flows aboard. And third, post-discharge sampling confirms exactly what was actually delivered to the receiver.
But simply drawing the samples, that is only half the battle. The really crucial point is this number right here, 12. These physical representative samples have to be safely retained on board in a designated locker for at least 12 months. You might be wondering, why 12 months? Because cargo quality claims almost never happen the day you discharge. They usually surface months later, after the cargo has been processed or sold downstream. These little bottles, they are your hard evidence.
And that brings us to a massive warning. Without proper samples, you literally have no evidence in a cargo dispute. Zero. If you skip the proper sampling procedure, or if you sign a receipt approving samples that you aren't absolutely sure represent the actual cargo, or even if they're just improperly stored and tossed out early, your ship's entire defense in a quality dispute will instantly collapse like a house of cards. Honestly, it won't even matter what actually happened to the cargo. Without those retained samples, you just have no evidence to bring to the table.
Section 3. The Criminal Exposure, MARPOL Compliance.
All right, that covers the cargo side, which takes us right out of the realm of commercial contract disputes and straight into environmental regulations and severe personal criminal risks. MARPOL is the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Hey, we're on a gas carrier. We carry LNG or LPG. We don't carry oil. But listen, MARPOL Annex I governs oil pollution compliance, and it applies strictly to every single gas carrier's bunker fuel operations. Even though your cargo isn't oil, your ship still has an engine room, it still has bunker fuel, it generates sludge, and it definitely produces oily bilge water. Because of that, your bilge and bunker operations fall strictly under Annex I.
This means every single discharge of oily bilge water or sludge must be properly and meticulously logged in the oil record book. Improper disposal overboard, or making even a single falsified entry into that book just to cover up a mistake, is one of the most heavily prosecuted maritime offenses worldwide. No joke. And this isn't just a corporate fine we're talking about. Falsifying the oil record book brings severe personal criminal liability for the specific individual officers who sign that log.
Section 4. Knowledge checked and transition.
Okay, we've covered some really heavy, high-stakes ground here today. Let's just pause for a second to test your retention of the absolute most critical legal distinction we've talked about so far. Under the Hague-Visby rules, is a carrier's seaworthiness obligation an absolute guarantee, or is it a due diligence duty? Think back to the distinction we made earlier about what the law actually requires you to prove if things go south.
And the answer is due diligence. It is absolutely not an absolute guarantee. Remember, the courts know perfectly well that ships operate in harsh, completely unpredictable environments. Owners simply must prove they took genuine, reasonable, and highly documented steps to make the ship seaworthy before departure. If some crazy latent defect causes an issue mid-voyage, despite your rigorous and documented maintenance, that due diligence standard is exactly what protects you.
So let's tie this whole shebang together. You can really see how these three pillars elevate what might just seem like routine, boring paperwork into an essential legal fortress. Seaworthiness is your due diligence obligation. It's the strict prerequisite for all your commercial contracts. Cargo sampling, that provides your physical dispute evidence, protecting your freight and liability. And MARPOL oil record book compliance completely protects you from massive environmental fines and personal criminal exposure. Everything commercial rests squarely upon these three pillars.
Which brings us to the end of the commercial and legal segment. We've covered the rules, the contracts, the liability frameworks, and your operational obligations. But what actually drives all of these super strict containment rules and cargo requirements? Why do these cargoes behave the way they do in the real world? Well, to answer that, we have to look at the molecules themselves. Next time, we're pivoting back to fundamental science, organic chemistry, and the hydrocarbon groups. We'll explore exactly how microscopic bonds dictate every single macro decision on a gas carrier. Until then, ask yourself, if a port state control inspector walked onto your ship right now, today, would your logs and sample lockers actually stand up in court? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.